Hello and welcome to Assemblies of the World with me, Anna Isabel. And I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Mary Kingsley. And Mary, welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Anna. It's very good of you. I don't know what to say. It will all be spontaneous. I've never done anything like this before, but
Well,
you're very compassionate. I've sensed that seeing other busy videos of you.
it's all we're doing is having a conversation which will hopefully touch and inspire everyone who watches it. So,
Yes,
and I know
I
that
hope so.
yeah, and I know that that's your intention is to touch and inspire people, particularly as you have trained as a psychotherapist as well. So
And
you're
particularly the young, because my heart really goes out to them. Well, it goes out to everyone at this confusing time. So.
exact. Now, if we just trace a little bit this interest in compassion and empathy that leads you to train as a psychotherapist, if we go back a little bit, one of the things that I've read about you is that you've had out of body experiences. I'm just going to let this plane go past.
It's all a test here, Anna.
One of the things that I've read about you is that you had out of body experiences. And particularly at the age of 13, there seems to have been a very important one. So, can you tell us about that and how it shaped your view of the world and led you to make some of the choices that you've made?
Well, it's completely shaped my world and it still influences me today. It was a profound thing that happened, but I just have to go back a little bit further to my grandmother, who mainly brought me up, who was an artist and a mystic and a psychic. And so I started having experiences when I was 3 that I could talk to her about them and she understood. She was an amazing woman. She loved clouds. She used to paint clouds in oils and things and look up at the sky, look at that magnificent cloud. So as far as geoengineering goes, you can imagine what an effect that's had on me and that I started noticing it around 35 years ago, but I just thought it was the way our thoughts were influencing water. But anyway, so there was this compassion. She was psychic. She gave premonitions and they came true. And so I was influenced a lot by that. But when I was 13, my mother gave me a book, an old book that at the time was about 100 years old. And that was an advanced course in yogi philosophy. And I started reading it, and 30 pages into it, I was sitting with a friend and we were playing truant, and I was sitting in my mother's place. And I remember, I can never ever forget it. And I said, this feels like my father, and this feels like the truth. This feels like why I was born to read, to have this knowledge. And then all of a sudden, I was classically looking at myself from the corner of the room, but I wasn't dead, like new near-death experiences. I was watching myself talking. That's the key. And I was the observer, and I was very still. I was timeless, a timeless being. And to the left of me was some archetypal feminine form. To the right of me and to the left of me, there was something that can only be described as spirit, and it was quite stern, actually. So there were these 3 factors. I was a trinity, and I was very well aware that I was looking at my child and that I was well pleased with this child. So up until then, I was quite self-conscious, very shy, used to blush at the drop of a hat. And when I came back in my body, I was in ecstasy for 6 weeks. I refused to go to school again, which I got away with because of the what was happening at the time with the schooling system and the fact that there was the head of the school was into William Blake and people like that, and very I could argue any philosophical point. And so I just didn't go back to school, and I started washing up in a hospice. And then they promoted me to taking the teas around. And when I took the teas around, I started talking to people, and they warmed to me immediately because they were leaving and they could sense that I knew that there was no death. And so I used to sit and talk with them. And then I got promoted again to just being with them and washing, giving them baths and things like that. That would not be allowed now. So I basically started work when I was 13, and I had tremendous confidence through this experience. I knew I was, the one being, that everything is one, that for 6 weeks afterwards, I was having all sorts of insights, seeing auras, knowing that it was one unified field that people should know now if they research physics, just even a little bit. It's one unified field. End of story. So I feel, instead of trying to work it all out and everything, we should just basically be in that mystery and enjoy it. We're here to play. Everything loves to play. So
That's so important, isn't it? We're here to play
we're
because
here to play.
it seems that everything is geared to stop us from playing because we're told that it's all about, being successful in a career and how so that we're able to buy the best things, the best house. That's what we're here to do. And yet, a few years ago when my beautiful dog came to live with us as a puppy, and I threw myself into reading everything I could about dogs. I came across Patricia O'Connell's wonderful work, who was an anthropologist and became a canine behaviorist. But one of the things that stuck out for me was she said that very few species actually play into adulthood, and that dogs and humans are two of the few species she knows about that actually play into adulthood. And that really stuck with me because not many adults play. And so obviously Teddy coming into our lives, that changed, that got us playing again. Um, and we play with him every day because 8 years on, he is as wanting to play as he was when he was a puppy. So
Mm.
that says something about joy, doesn't it? And the need
Mm.
to laugh and be joyous, whether it's play through creativity or actual games that we might play with our children, with our dogs, um, maybe with some very unusual cats. But
Yes.
you, I think it's very important what you just said there.
Well, you see, the thing is, uh, my feeling is with this experiment I did in the Himalayas, especially when nature was right there, that everything loves to play. And, we have to look at physics, this separating particles, joining a particle and then sending it to opposite ends of the universe. And when you change one, the other changes simultaneously. There's this connection. And what I've discovered is that everything really loves to play. I wouldn't say it was just dogs, although we have to look at why as DOG, GOD backwards. We have to look at that because dogs are really very, very special indeed. But everything is special. And my experience with snakes and all sorts of creatures that I never thought, spiders, all sorts of things that I never thought I would be able to be around, be in their presence, let alone play with them. I would say everything loves to play. Why? We have to look at the creator. What is the nature of the creator? Everyone's saying, oh, God and this and God that. But let's look at the nature of God. And there's one thing that's universal, and that is really everything does love to play. So we've got a very, very playful creator, a creator that obviously loves beauty, you know, um, where a creator that's obviously deeply compassionate because animals demonstrate that, even particles demonstrate that. There was they take all these things down from YouTube because they don't want us to be enlightened. But there were a group of German scientists that were looking at the energy of trees and things when someone is in their presence and they're wounded. You can actually see the energy coming towards them. And they even did it with yogurt. And someone cut themselves in front of the yogurt, and then you could see they have the means of photographing this energetically. But they tried to do it a number of times, and then the yogurt, the bacteria, the aliveness of the yogurt, sensed it was playing. The people were playing a game, and it just put a halt to that experiment. But nonetheless, there are films on YouTube people can see that there is compassion there, and other animals save animals that you wouldn't think, they would even go near. And people suddenly risk their lives in a second. Someone is about to jump off a bridge, someone's about to do that, and people are in action immediately. Where does that impulse come from?
And I think we are broadening the meaning of the word play to be about creation and creativity and the interplay that exists between us and nature, or between nature as um, an expression of the creator. So this comes back to, so if we take one definition of play, this is about the ability to engage in games, and
Yes.
and and maybe that is limited if we keep to that narrow definition. On the other hand, if we broaden that definition to be about the joy of creating and interplaying with what is happening around us, that's really very important, because it means then that when we are faced with challenges of the kind that we are faced with now, instead of reacting with fear, perhaps we can react in a different way that is about creativity and rising to the challenge of creating something better, something new.
Yes, precisely. And, really, we can pull all these threads, play and creativity and everything, back to the nature of love, because love is a very misused word now. I love an ice cream. I'd love to have sex. I'd love to make a lot of money and all of this. That was what came through with that book. What is
Sorry,
the
you've referenced the book and we're not clear on what the book is.
Yes, I don't think I'm even clear about it. It was just something after my beloved dog died. I've had a number of dogs, but Tulsi was very, very special, not just for me, but for the locals in an area in remote Himachal where dogs weren't respected at all. But she was called the Shining One by locals, and she was absolutely incredible. And she was left outside a temple. And I found her on Christmas Day in the snow with her four sisters. Well, one brother, three sisters rather. And she was very special and she taught me so much. And she took 6 days to die. She was poisoned. And during that process, I went through an awful lot. And at the end of it, this writing came, and it was published by a friend who since died in PDF form. But it is out there, and it's been circulated, and I know it's been used by a number of people because I see what's written, but I don't claim it as mine. I have no wished, this is not one of these things where, oh, I've got a book and you can purchase it here. It is out there. I'm willing to send the PDF to anyone. But I'm losing my thread here. What were we talking about? Yes, it's called Love's Mysterious Ways. And that's it, basically. Love's Mysterious Ways, uniting physics, mysticism, and psychology, because they all really do fit together like a hand in a glove, and it is very, very simple. The whole thing is so simple. When I come back from the Himalayas and I look at YouTube now, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. But it's really, as you've been saying as well, it's really about entering this state of play. It's love, play, compassion, enjoyment, loving to express. This is all, different aspects of the one thing, which is love.
So you've talked about the Himalayas, and I think then that we need to have a little bit more background because it seems that you have spent your time abroad. So tell us about that.
Well, the thing is, to go back to that experience when I was 13, I worked in various fields of social work as a carer, which means basically you're on the front line. You're with the people you're taking care of. You're not just sitting in an office and dishing out tablets. You actually have to sit with them. So I was a social worker, all sorts of things. And then I had my children very early when I was 20 and everything, and I made a lot of money by accident. I made millions by accident, and it didn't sit well with me. What I had materially, I always felt uncomfortable with it. And so I left that situation. I divorced and married someone who was very spiritual indeed, a really wonderful man. But it was a brief marriage. Very complicated story here that I won't go into, but we had to separate. And because of what happened with my husband, my first husband, I had to look at what was evil. But that was basically brewing, because I had this wonderful experience from a very young age, and this grandmother that I had, who was basically a saint, um, this experience of love and the importance of love. And what kept on cutting into that was just how dark human nature can be, and some people can be rather. So I had to know, and then I had done a few stupid things, and so I had to look, well, how can you have these realizations and behave in certain ways, and how can people, be so greedy, can lie, can cheat, what is this world? And that's what took me into psychotherapy. I wanted to know. In fact, I had 3 different trainings, and my thesis was The Origins of Evil. But I was too young and naive. I saw an aspect of that then, the archetypal aspect of that, as you would as a psychotherapist. But I hadn't realized basically what makes us behave in, yourself, there are things going on now, especially in relation to young children and babies, that it's just phenomenal. How can people do that?
So this is the question that has been asked. Actually, I think the First World War is probably where people started to think in those terms, and then the horrors of the last war. And we thought we were over that. And here it comes again. And it's such a juxtaposition, or it's such a paradox that on the one hand, we're seeing darkness that we can't comprehend, and that actually, for many of us, just knowing it exists is enough. We don't need to know the details because it's too horrific.
Yes.
And that is juxtaposed with this idea of the fact that we are one, and that the creator is playful and joyful and loving, and the two jar against each other as truths. So, many people will have asked the question, how could God allow this to happen? And then many people will say, well, yeah, it's not to do with him, it's free will. But then on the other hand, we're saying everything is the creator. So, in your mind, how do we square this?
Really, we have to look at where are we? And we're obviously in a dimension here where there are opposites, where there's a polarity between light and dark, good and evil, male and female. Whatever you discover, there's if it's followed by you can find the polarity. You can find if I say one thing, you can find the opposite of that thing. So this is where we are in this world of polarities. And then you can look at this point in time, because I wouldn't say it's just to do with the last two world wars, that it goes back a bit further than that. You just got to look at our own history in this country and what they were doing in the Tower of London, the torture techniques. And it really just goes back. But there are people like Greg Braden, rather, that says that there's no evidence of war before 7,000 years ago. So, but then the Hindus would say, well, that was a cycle of Satya Yoga, where everything was peaceful and everything. And then we came in to this identification of self. Really, as a psychotherapist and just looking at the whole picture now, I see it all boils down to there's you and there's me, in rather than there's us, and it's one field, one unified field. So yes, we're in the world of opposites right now. And when I was 13 and had that experience, there were 2 billion people on the planet and 69% more nature. And it was ushering in 1967, which was a wonderful time where people were waking up. And it wasn't all about drugs and rock and roll that time. It was a very soul-searching time. So the climate was right. And now we're in a time where there's a lot of fear and people are overwhelmed by the evil they're seeing that's going on, and they're overwhelmed by negative information, and they've lost faith in the power of love because it seems like evil is dominating, but really there is a balance. There is a
I feel, looking around me, that this is a crisis point, a spiritual crisis point, and that there is a quickening where the the purpose of the crisis is to quicken and deepen the understanding that we have strayed from the light, and that as we have become, as a culture, more materialist in our perspective of the world, that we are losing ourselves and our sense of our connection, and that perhaps there is a purpose to this, which would be to heal that sense of separation from the divinity. And I think where we get lost in fear is that very natural fear of pain and loss, which is pretty hardwired into all of us, and and to animals as well. No, very few of us go and seek pain. And as a psychotherapist yourself, you know that people tend to seek us when they can't avoid the pain anymore. So this is a crisis moment. I am ill, or I am losing everything I have through a divorce or whatever. And I know I've got some demons I need to purge. And now I think the pain I'm living through is worse than having to face those demons. And I know I need to do that in order to come to a, a, a peaceful resolution here. So I feel that is where we're at collectively. What is your sense?
Well, the thing is, we've been programmed for so long into fearing leaving our bodies, death, and becoming so material. And with the media the way it is, we see images of very painful deaths, and indeed those that only have the awareness that they're a body seemingly do go through traumatic experiences of separating from that body. And so people become fixated with those kind of images. But when you really know for sure through experiences that there is no death, then that's it. We are free when we have that experiences, when we have that knowledge rather. And that's why I think there are so many NDE, near-death experiences, channels popping up now with people trying to reassure others. But the thing is, you can't really know for sure unless you have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience. That gives you the you become 100% convinced by that. But it is good that there are these people are speaking up about their stories, that there is no death, and also that people can look into science, into physics, and see rather that not even a single photon can be destroyed. Everything becomes recycled. That's why there's this statue of Shiva outside of CERN, with the wheel of life. It just goes round and round. So I feel people need to really educate themselves into the fact that there is no death. And as they explore that, they will have dreams, and hopefully they will have experiences. And that will be our release. That this is just a test here. It's a testing ground. It's a place where we learn and evolve, basically in relation to love. That everything, boils down to a lack of love. What will happen when we leave our body? And imagine if you left your body and you soared into space and you came across a group of beings and they said to you, what's happening down there? How can people behave like that and blow each other up? How can that happen? What could you say in a few words? Well, you could only just say this. There's a lack of love. a lack of understanding of what love is, and that love really does make the world go around. So this is a thing we have to become very simple and basic again. How can we experience love? And that's very simple. We can just walk out the door. And if you go out with that awareness, what I want to experience, how can I help humanity? What then life will put in front of you a homeless person that needs a sandwich, or you don't even need to give them a sandwich. You just have to bend down and say, "How are you, darling? How's it going?" That someone's willing to listen and care. You don't even have to buy the sandwich. So for goodness sake, it is really is all very simple. And we've got all these methods. This will make you enlightened. Learn about this, read this book, do this, but really, you just have to walk out the door now, and it's there before you what we can do to change this world.
And that comes back to compassion, and it comes back to what I was saying, that it's when we are in a crisis that we suddenly feel the jolt to act, to do something, to change.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I'm seeing around me. You mentioned the Himalayas, and I was asking you
Can,
about that.
can I just interject there, because this is so important, because it came to me when writing that book, the information came that the only way to feel love is to give love. And when we get that, the only way we really feel, even if it's in relation to making love, if you lie there and expect yourself to be, have this pleasure, it won't work. The only way we really feel love is when we give love.
And I think that's because we are engaging, and that's an important factor here, is that we need to engage, but from a place of love and compassion rather than from a place of fear. Because if we engage with fear, then we are going to be contributing to darkness. Whereas if we engage with love, with compassion, then there's something else that we are contributing to.
But Anna, there are some laws. There are some fundamental laws to life. And the only way we can feel love is when we give love, is a fundamental law. It pervades manifestation. And it's so powerful if you can just ponder, not you, but anyone just ponders this point. When have they felt the most love? It's when they've given love. If people could just get that point. So it really is all incredibly simple, but we've been programmed to becoming so complex that we think it must be here, it must be there, if I just listen to this, if I just do this meditation technique or whatever. Not that if we just go out and just try and make someone happy, positive little remark at a bus stop, a little bit of praise to someone, especially the young. I've noticed when I say, "Oh, that color really suits you." I don't know this person. I'm standing at the bus stop. "Oh, that looks lovely," or whatever. You see their whole face light up. They feel really good. And they get on the bus, they go out, and they feel so good. They pass that on to someone else. And that person passes it on to someone else. It's just really that simple.
It's true. I have never been one to hold back with compliments, and there is that where you see the person suddenly shine for a moment.
Yes.
It it's I always say it's like pouring water on a wilted flower, and
Yes.
it comes through, and we don't know how badly the person who's receiving it is in need of that,
Yes.
or how big a thing that is for them. So, and we never will. And
Yeah.
that's so really, again, if we're wanting to lift the darkness, then we need to engage, um, and live in a loving way. You know, people sometimes say to me, how what do I do to be more spiritual? And I think, well, it's not a manual. It's what you feel in your heart, and it's
Yes.
the engagement with compassion and love for not just other people, but for all of life on this planet. Because then again, we're helping to raise that collective vibration, and we're interacting in play. And you're right, there is something that comes, that is, that I think that's the moment at which we begin to feel the playfulness of the creator.
Yes.
It's when we begin to do that, that we begin to see the playfulness, because you think something, and out of the blue it's there, you know.
Mm.
And but you kind of have to get into that open minded um space, and then you see things happening.
Yes. You know, Anna, I did 3 trainings and I was very intense about what is evil, or what is the mind, what is our psychology, and all of this. And, you know, the Freudians can be pretty heavy, and the Jungians too can be heady. And I went to a talk given by R.D. Laing, who was a psychiatrist and a maverick. And he told this story of this man that was sent to him because for years and years he was depressed and he had all this treatment and things. And so they said, look, this is an experiment. What can you do with this man? And this man happened to be Scottish, and R.D. Laing was Scottish. So this man came in, they had it was for about 3/4 of an hour, the session. So R.D. Laing begun it by sort of taking the mickey out of the Scottish. And then this patient picked up on it. So most of the session was taken up with joking and taking the mickey out of the Scots and things in there. And the man was laughing, and R.D. Laing was laughing and everything. And then R.D. Laing said, well, you know, it's time to close the session now and everything. And the man said, he shook his hand, smiling, and got up. And then he went, but you haven't given me any medicine. And R.D. Laing said to him, you go away now and you think of what happened in this session. And that was a pivotal point for that patient. His whole life changed. What were they doing? They were playing and laughing. He forgot about his problem. He, you know, if that was another side, he would have, oh, I've got this symptom and that, and this is it happened to me and whatever. And that really struck me. It's, you know, it was part of the turning point of, am I in the right profession? You know, should I be doing something else with my life? Does psychotherapy really get it that it can be this simple? You know, of course, you know, that can't happen with everyone, but there's an element there. There is an element of play
There
between
is,
the therapist and the
absolutely.
patient client.
I certainly, I can't, you know, I can't think of a single session in which I don't laugh with my clients at some point about something. Um, Even in the most heartrending stories that I'm hearing, my client will suddenly say something, and we both see a glimmer of absurdity.
And that's where the healing comes in.
And that's where the healing comes in, because it's
Yeah.
that moment of recognition, which is so vital. So I keep wanting to come back to how you ended up in India and in the Himalayas.
Well, you know, I had to bring 2 children up, and I did a large part of that on my own. And I was, you know, in London, I was teaching. I founded a government registered psychotherapy training organization. I had I was dressed in black a lot then. I had my briefcase, my car. I was you know, and I was burnt out basically. And I started to see the symptoms of burnout. And then I had a very, very profound dream. Shall I say the dream? Because sometimes these
Yeah.
things, I knew it was harder and harder to get out of bed, and I didn't know what I would do, because I had, like everyone, all these financial responsibilities and all these patients. I was doing about 40 sessions a week then. But anyway, I had this dream where I was standing with this finger outstretched, and someone came towards me with a needle and syringe, and I knew it was the venom of a cobra. And they injected me with this venom, and I knew in the dream that I was about to die. So I found myself in a bathroom, and I was preparing for death. I started brushing my teeth and I was washing my face. And then I opened my mouth to swell some water. And as I opened my mouth became wider and wider, and I fell inside my mouth and down, down, down into this space. I was just floating. And then below me, I could see this head. And coming up, it was this massive Buddha. And I was parallel with the base of the Buddha. And then the Buddha slowly opened its eyes, and I froze in terror. And I woke up shaking like this. And so I thought, because I used to teach about it, I thought, what is that? So I went to my library room, and I picked up a book by Ramana Maharishi. This is all at random with the laws of sync. I just picked up this book and opened it like this. And Ramana Maharishi was saying, God is like the venom of a cobra. When he bites you, you die. And I thought, this is it. I can't take any more. I can't push myself any longer. I can't try and help or heal or whatever. I've always wanted to go to the Himalayas. I've always wanted to just see if you can trust life. Can you trust life? Can you let go of your money? Can you let go of possessions and just, as Zorba says, cut your ropes and be free? And that's what I did. And of course, people thought I was mad. I had to close my practice, which was, you can't just do it overnight. That took 6 months. It was, I had everything against me. You're going mad. I was working with the team of doctors as a group practice. Like, take a year off. You're just burnt out. Come back in a year. We love what you're doing and all of this. Don't go. I had everything thrown at me, but I knew I had to go. And that was because of a spiritual experience when I was 18, when I was at a party once. And it was at a house where they had a beautiful picture of the painting of the Himalayas. And I was looking at it, and all of a sudden I left my body and went into the painting. And I knew I had lived there in that tiny little village by this incredible mountain. And I found that mountain, and I found that village. And I lived there for 12 years, and then I went to the other side of that mountain. I lived alone in shepherd's huts. I loved Kailash, the mountain. Kailash is another name for Shiva. And of course, the locals know that there are certain mountains in the Himalaya that are interdimensional portals. And, you see this, and you're in the jungle alone, and you're seeing all that. You're just realizing the unified field. It was a wonderful experience, and I'm so glad I don't have the possessions I had, the money I had, the status I had. Oh, you're a psychotherapist, so you have to behave like this and whatever. I'm free.
Tell us more about these interdimensional points. How, what happens when you're there? Does everybody see this? What's going on there?
Well, the locals do because they live in these very remote regions. They see it, they see things in the sky. But the first time I had a, a very profound experience that, again, one of these life-changing experiences was that after a year, I had seen so much and I was, there's the yoga capital of the world. Well, I saw that being formed in Rishikesh in India, and the most incredible place just obliterated within 6 months, cafes and this. And so I went into the jungle, and anyway, there's so many stories, but the long and short was I was so fed up again. It wasn't just what was happening in London to get me there. It goes on and on. So I thought I'm going in to live in a remote cave in the remotest place I can get to. So a yogi told me where that was, and I got there and everything. I got a mattress with the little bit of money that I had left because I had absolutely nothing. I bought buckets and things and paid for someone for at least 6 months. I thought it's good, 6 months. I got to be able to just be able to cut the ropes completely and to go up there. And the night before that happened, it snowed, and it snowed in May, and it was a very rare occurrence. All the roads went down. You had to have a lot of money to get a helicopter to get out. I was in a monastery where I saw things happening that I didn't like. I didn't want to stay there. So it was like a bit of a stubborn thing. I just thought, there's the snow. I've had enough. I'm just going to walk out into the snow. So I was walking for about 2 hours, and of course I could have dropped dead and died, but I was so to refrain myself from using a certain word here, but I don't care. So then I saw this figure walking towards me, and it was Henrik, who was 32 years old, and he taught troops to fight in the Himalayas. And he said to me, don't go that way because all the roads have collapsed. And I said, well, don't go that way unless you want to pay a colossal amount for a helicopter. They're just taking Western Buddhists that have a lot of money back to a safe area. So we agreed that we would walk, and we walked for 8 days. And it was absolutely incredible. No light pollution. He was a staunch atheist. He said, I'm here um, to do climbing. I don't believe in, these Indians and naming all these mountains and all this. But the first experience after the third day changed his mind completely, because he would take my rucksack and we'd pass through this bit where the road had collapsed completely. And then he'd come back for me. And I tried to go a little bit of the way, and I slipped, and I was literally hanging over a precipice. And there was at least a 2,000 feet fall to a river below me. And so I knew enough by then just to breathe and stay aware in that transition. And I could see his face. He was absolutely petrified. And then out of nowhere, this little Tibetan looking man appeared. And with one hand, he grabbed my arm and just threw me. I mean, it was just a miracle. I went through the air and I landed near Henrik, and Henrik was just looking at me like, what? And then we went to turn and look for the man, and believe me, Anna, there is no way that man could have disappeared. It was just this collapsed road and these high glaciers, and he was gone. And then it happened a couple of days afterwards. And we had such an incredible journey, sleeping in caves. And, he was a trained mountain man. In his pocket, he had glucose packets and things like that. We survived. And I would like to tell you this because I think it is an important spiritual experience. He introduced me to Kailash. He took me to this village when we got back, and we were absolutely exhausted. We got back and we were walking up to this village, and I was looking at this mountain, and I said, what is this mountain? And he said, well, they call it Kailash. He was transformed by then. He knew that there was no death. He knew everything. He had a major spiritual realization. I was looking at this mountain, and all of a sudden the mountain dissolved into pure light, pure, effervescent, just, the light that people talk about. And then everything turned into light. And when I came to, I was falling over and totally disorientated. I couldn't remember my name, where I was, or whatever. And it took about 20 minutes because I now know that my ego had to dissolve in order to see this. But what it showed me was that, yes, Einstein, everything is light, this is physics. But if there was not form, if there was not the play of light that comes in, that creates manifestation, then what would we have? We'd just have this awareness and the light. And that wouldn't be very playful, would it? That wouldn't be very interesting. We have to have manifestation. We have to have this light coming together in various frequencies in order to create all this incredible form that we have. So that satisfied me in the sense of, what is this matter? Well, it's like Einstein and the great physicists have said, it's different frequencies of light. But if you want the pure light, then okay, that's lovely, pure light. If you can be satisfied with just that,
Well,
and it's a
I
lot to be satisfied just with that and dissolve into that pure light.
and there are different ways in which we can dissolve into pure light. And I imagine we don't need to be going to the Himalayas for that. Although the Himalayas, I know, have, let's just say, are famed, I think, for being very special. And I'm just thinking about the Shintamani crystal and all the stories about looking for the Shintamani crystal, whether it's real or not real, and people describing very similar things to what you've described as
I
they
don't know about this crystal. What is
ah
this crystal?
so well that's a whole other um, field of study, but there is a legendary crystal called the Shintamani crystal, which is meant to be the most pure, the most amazing, and it's very linked with Hindu tradition and tied up with the Himalayas. And so this is why it's not the first time I've heard of something that you're describing there. The first time I heard it to do with was by people who were on a quest to find the Shintamani crystal in the Himalayas and coming across exactly as you described this extraordinary um, experience. So there is something very special, I think, about that.
Well, you see, it's not just about these experiences and about knowing. I spent 22 years living without money, living by doing service for people, waiting until people brought food to me. And then I got married to a very old yogi. It was a celibate marriage, and that was just for my visa, so I could have an uninterrupted visa. And so we took care of temples for his friends and things, very ancient temples. And so it was a constant state of being able to live it. And I think this is where people get stuck nowadays. They think it's all about certain realizations, and then they'll get it, and then it will be okay. And goes back to saying, just walk out the door with an open heart, and it will be there. You will feel love because you can give love anywhere now. There's such a need for love. So, it wasn't just about these realizations. It was a constant living it. I lived with yogis for 4 years before I went to the borders of Tibet. And they were very sincere, very respectful, but they used to say to me, sit, don't get up to do something, because I was so used to doing, and I just had to sit. And I had two dresses, which was the sadhu tradition. One day I was so fed up with wearing these stained rags, and there was just one little washing area. I got really mad with this dress. I thought, I'm not going to put it on. I'm not going through this anymore. And I just threw it with all my might, and it landed on this tree like a crucifix. I just thought, that looks like a crucifix. And then it hit me, I'm being martyred here. And then I turned around and looked at them, and they were just like that. You want a cup of tea? Like that. And I got it. I got it. It was like the dregs of the spoiled brat that had to have whatever. I thought, I don't, it's all about this Zorba the Greek, where he says to Boss, Boss, you have everything but a little madness. Unless a man has a little madness, he never dare cut the ropes to be free. And it's this cutting, cutting, cutting. And that was a pivotal point as well. So it wasn't just a case of all these realization. I was sitting there in the jungle in a cave and all of that. You have to live it. You have to have the last bit of whatever, and you're hungry, and someone comes in and, would you like half of this? Would you like this? This is the constant challenge.
It is,
We're
and
challenged all the time,
we are, and
in every moment.
in various contexts. And I don't believe that we all have to trips to the Himalayas to experience the beginnings of that enlightenment. And I think there is no better way to end our conversation today than to say all we need to do is go into the world with an open heart and
Yes.
and be genuine in our compassion for all that surround us. So, Mary, thank you so much for that reminder.
Thank you, Anna. It's been lovely talking with you.
And thank you all for watching. And I hope that our conversation has inspired you. And certainly, the Community Assembly of the British Isles is exactly about that, about bringing people together so that we can all be those playful creators of the world we would all like to see. And
Yes.
so if you haven't already, do please go to our website and join us and find out how we might play into creating a better world.
Yes.
Until next time,
And a playful world.
and a playful world. Until next time,
Yeah, it's
goodbye.
lovely. Bye-bye now.